I was 20 years old. It had now been 3 years since my mom died, 2 years since my grandma died, and 6 months since my close friend died. I was walking down nearby the legislature, my emotions mute from sorrow, when I heard the resounding word, love, in my head. It pulsated with a life of its own, a meaning of its own, and suddenly the feelings of love started pushing up and out, like a torrent of water drowning me, pulling me into a vortex of my mind to discover that grief is in fact an expression of love. That pulsating feeling grew stronger, and as I opened my eyes, I felt like I had been freed from a cave of my own making into a world in which all I wanted to do was put out love, and love unconditionally. Love has many facets, and I've always appreciated how the Greeks defined love in different forms, to differentiate between romantic and platonic, conditional and unconditional, and everywhere in between. Now I could choose philia, the love of strong friendship, to be what I consider the most important type of love, but I choose agape. Agape is unconditional sacrificial love. Agape is a kind of love felt by a person willing to do anything for another, including sacrificing themselves, without expecting anything in return. And that's the type of love I hope to spread to the world, but I also hope to try to spread this unconditional, selfless love to ourselves. I'm really an advocate to teach kids self-compassion, so that from a young age, children can know how to take responsibility while being understanding towards themselves. In my opinion, you can't really truly love others until you've learned to love yourself, because we learn emotions from the inside out and experiencing them from the inside. And love is a very personal experience. We live in a world of so many conditions, so many pressures, both peer and internal, and yet we strive to be our best selves for others. We strive to give love and hope. Maybe someone someday will give it back to us and mean it. Or maybe if we just peer pressure ourselves enough, we'll build up our self-esteem. But where is the love for ourselves that we are told to give so freely to others? Where is it? Well, we have to learn it. Self-compassion saved my life. No, this is not hyperbole. As a child and as a teen, I struggled hard with my mental health. I was my own greatest enemy, my greatest risk of harm. One of the first spiritual experiences, I was in Newfoundland, standing on a cliff. I felt like I had been pulled to the edge, not by the wind, but by something else. I felt the urge to lean on the wind. And so I did. I trusted the wind to support my weight 100 meters off the ground. Falling was an option if the elements were not kind. In the wind's embrace, I heard the call of love to choose to fall into my own darkness or take the hard road of compassion and light. And that was the day that I recognized how mean I was being to myself, and that something needed to change profoundly if I wanted to feel better, if I wanted to survive. The first thing I realized is that I didn't know a thing about myself. How strange. I knew more about every single one of my friends, but hardly a real deep truth about myself. Then it occurred to me, was I even a friend of myself? The way I'd been acting would point otherwise. I was currently a big bully to myself, And bullying wasn't doing anything but keeping me down. So I set the goal of my 12th birthday to become a friend to myself. Start with the basics, like I was saying earlier in the story wisdom. Things like favorite color, preferred name, favorite music, ABBA. Then I got a bit deeper with favorite hobbies, things I liked, disliked, people I liked or disliked, and why, and how I truly felt. And so that day came, my 12th birthday. At 8:10 p.m., the exact time I was born, I excused myself and gave myself this little necklace like the one I'm wearing and committed to self-improvement. I gave myself a rose quartz necklace, as rose quartz is a representation of love and friendship, and set some rules. Well, when this initially started, when I'd mess up, I'd punish myself for not getting it right. It took me over a year to realize that that was another part of my problem, was how I treat myself if I'd mess up. And as Kristen Neff actually talks about in her book, this is something we're taught when we're learning self-esteem. We must always be doing our best, and if we're not doing our best, we are not deserving of our own esteem. And we have to force ourselves to be better than average, and you can't all be better than average, or else who's the average? And in this, I wasn't giving myself the space to grow and was being abusive and harsh from within. And that abuse wasn't helping me. It was hurting me. As I became kinder to myself, I started to flourish. I wrote a book. I started volunteering and learning all sorts of arts and jumping off the deep end of life. Taking risks without looking down, because all of the sudden, it didn't matter if I failed. I had a friend in me. So I started actually questioning everything, like why I needed makeup to feel beautiful. And this really important moment came when I looked at myself in a full mirror for the first time and actually saw myself there, barren, and appreciated my body. I looked at the makeup I was about to plaster on my face and paused. No, makeup was not what made me beautiful. I was already beautiful. Makeup enhanced what was already there. And that was the night of my grade 8 dance. And I had the most wonderful night ever, and may or may not have said no extremely rudely to a guy who asked me to dance. In an entry I wrote, this is the following entry I wrote that day. Beauty is not something that comes from within. It doesn't come with time and money. Beauty is something that lies with us from day one. There is nothing different about my appearance today, but my view is different. I am beautiful, I whispered to myself convincingly enough, until I finally see the truth. Makeup is only to enhance what is already there. Trying to become skinny is but the opposite of beauty. Love is from the heart and reaches out to the soul. Love is one power, vision is another. That was the first time, and I was 13. This was the first time I learned this lesson, and as I recently learned, you have to relearn these skills over and over and over again in life. To look yourself truly in a mirror is a true challenge. But with the spirit of love in our hearts, we must muster the courage to be brave for ourselves. Loving yourself is not selfish, it's brave, it's not egotistical, it's compassionate and caring. You do it for yourself so you can help others. And it's something we have to practice daily if we want it to stick with us. We are never truly done learning. As I grew into a teenager, I began to ponder what really made up self-love and broke it down into self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and the ability to let go. Yes, I could look my body in the mirror and love it, but could I look my mind in the mirror and say the same? Guilt, shame, embarrassment create hurdles in being able to see oneself clearly. Looking back at your life and accepting when things went wrong just as equally as when things went right is amazingly difficult. How was I to accept that I had allowed myself to stay in unhealthy relationships with friends long after they'd shown themselves to be bullies? How could I accept that I had an ego and was competitive to a state of alienating and hurting other people's emotions? How could I accept that I too had been a bully in my own life, at times just projecting the same issues that had happened to me on others? Hurt people hurt themselves just as they hurt others. It is while pondering these questions that I tried to take the perspective of a friend. I tried to see my life in the context of the ups and downs and just see everything as it was. Not good or bad, just something that happened in the past. Accepting that changed everything. It was oddly easier the first time to accept, forgive, and love myself. But I had to learn this all again when I was 21. As an adult, I had lost my main support system. I found in my mom, my grandma, my friends, they were all gone. I had never felt more alone. Desperation had led to 3 separate abusive relationships, and now I felt broken. I felt guilty because I felt like I should have been able to recognize the signs and get away before it was too late. Sometimes that guilt follows me around in the present, even though I know none of this was my fault. When we're in emotionally fragile states, it's easy to get lured in by the echoes of fake promises and love. And this weight was bogging me down, slowing me down on a day-to-day basis. My own words of self-compassion no longer felt compassionate because I, in fact, had grown into a stranger to myself. I no longer knew myself and wasn't sure if I wanted to. To build that compassion of the future, I had to learn new things. I had to accept that I was struggling day to day with the traumas of the past, and these traumas were emotional traumas that I wasn't getting support for, and certain traumas were ongoing. I was stuck in what for years seemed like a permanent survival mode, being disappointed over and over and over again by humanity. My new self was jagged, torn, ripped to shreds, and expected to pull themselves together again. A warrior, a survivor, but terrified of thriving, terrified of living. Unfortunately, after 6 years of different traumatic events, I was stuck trying to run away from the confines of my own mind. Just being alive felt like the accomplishment of a century. But again, I was driven by difficulty to seek out the light, seek out love, and try again. 1 year later, and the moment of self-acceptance in my new form as a lesbian led to my soonish-to-be wife. They opened up the gates to my soul for me again. They helped me unpack my traumas and rest, to stop running and start digging, making way for the train of life to move forward. I was faced with 7 years of my life that I'd buried deep in the crevices of my mind that needed to be recognized, unraveled, and then let go. So again, as I had years beforehand, I asked myself the questions of who I was. I used my partner's feedback to see my past from a different perspective and practiced perspective taking. This allowed me to gain insight and stop allowing the past to hold such a strong power over my present. It was okay that I was not okay, and it is okay to not be okay. And more importantly, it was okay for me not to be able to return to the peace that I had once felt in my past. My new present demanded a different sort of peace, and if it was okay if it wasn't as stable as I initially hoped. With this, I worked hard to start forgiving myself, to stop blaming myself for the actions of the past. I looked into my past with clearer eyes than ever before. For the first time, with a key bit of information that I really had never known before, that I was autistic, and that changed the context of my life. I finally truly understood why behind so many broken aspects of relationships that had never made sense to me, and I also started to feel a deep anger about this. But all emotions are critical if we are talking about self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. They are all part of us as a whole. I was angry at my mom for ultimately having had known and never told me about my autism, at the people who had known but had never told me, or worse, had taken advantage of the fact that I was autistic and didn't know. And though being autistic did not let me off the hook for everything, and I was ultimately responsible for my own actions, this context allowed me to stop blaming myself for everything and to redistribute the blame, but also forgiveness. For if we can learn, we can forgive. For if someone is trying their best and is still trying to do better, then, in my opinion, they do deserve forgiveness. We forgive not for the other people, but for ourselves, so we can move on. We will all be capable of making mistakes and accountable for them, yet the wise person knows it's not our mistakes that when our true selves are shown, but in our attempts to amend them and grow. So you, yes, you are deserving of forgiveness. You are deserving of self-acceptance and love. You are a beautiful culmination of your past, present, and future selves, rolled into one beautiful being. Yes, we are all jagged rocks, waiting to be tumbled into a beautiful gem, yet we will always have our rough edges. And they don't need to be smooth. But you do need to be willing to let go. It is so easy to live in the past or future because the present is something that many of us want to avoid. But maybe we aren't doing this intentionally, but the present can be absolutely unappealing when we feel like we haven't done enough and have something to accomplish, or when in the past inaction haunts us and makes us scared and scarred of living in the present, because we don't want that hurt to grow. This is when we need to be able to let go. Letting go is not forgetting. Letting go is allowing the past to be the past, the future to be the future, and the present to be the present. Letting go involves trusting yourself enough to believe that you will make the decisions you need to make in the future, that your past won't repeat itself, and that you will be able to face the struggles of the present, even if they remind you of the past. It's believing in yourself to make the changes you need and knowing you can do it. You can live your life, and you will have your own back if you need it. It's the faith to know that you have built up supports in your mind that you need. So instead of turning crutches into behavior, you can now have a mega suit of self-compassion to help you. I remember the tears I shed when I could finally say the words, "I trust you," to my partner, when I could finally trust myself. I had forgotten that feeling for years. And now, as the ice slowly melted and started forming cracks around my heart, I could look inward and say, I love you. I am here for you. I am not going to abandon you. And yes, none of this is easy. Each aspect is difficult, but it is possible. So today, I leave you with this story of hope. I am no one special. I am just someone who chose to take the leap of faith and self-compassion and embrace the spirit of love. Now, today, our closing hymn is Lean on Me. But this time, I want you to sing the song to yourself. Sing it as a song of compassion to yourself and as a song of freedom. Feel the power of being a friend to yourself. Feel the power that extending a hand to yourself can have, because you're deserving of this love, compassion, freedom, and forgiveness. You are deserving of everything this world has to offer. Lean on Me is number 1021 in your teal hymnal.